You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
من هناك لشوارزنيجر أوب 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 أوب.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee joined by Duane Rollins, as always. And today, to start the show, Beau at Dure Sports on social media to talk a little bit about the NWSL and U.S. Women's National Team playing a friendly tomorrow against Sweden. Beau, first of all, how are you today?
I am good. It's a beautiful day in Northern Virginia.
All right, can't really ask for more, but tomorrow, U.S. Women's National Team, a friendly against Sweden. What is your thought on this friendly, and what can you tell us about the state of mind of the program right now?
Revenge, I suppose. Certainly, Sweden dealt them a pretty harsh defeat, but it is essentially a friendly, and in a way, it's a relief to see the U.S. women's team treating a friendly as a friendly. And what I mean by that is that in the past, it's really seemed like it's more of a marketing tool that, okay, we're going to play all our 18 players over and over again until they all reach 300 caps, and you're never going to see any new players. You're never going to see any experimentation because it's like we're always on. This is early in a cycle, and we may see some more experimentation. It looks like the three-back system might be dead, which is probably for the best. But it's a worthwhile experiment to try this early in the cycle with this far away from a major tournament. And so it is like a friendly that we'd be used to seeing on the men's side of things, where it might try some new things, see some different people in different places, and watch the development of players like Rose Lavelle or Mallory Pugh, who are coming into their own.
Yeah, Beau, it's good to see the U.S. doing that. As you say, I think with Canada's 2 games this year, they'll be doing their high school homework on the bench during halftime. So that's something to look forward to. We'll preview that game tomorrow. Speaking of Canada and the NWSL, one of the talks up here after the announcement of the league was that one of their priorities would be to try and get a team in the NWSL. I'm just wondering, from a league perspective, whether you think that would be something, a Canadian team that would be of interest and value to the NWSL.
I think it's of value immediately because I think that it makes sense to spread into Canada as well. I mean, I think MLS has certainly benefited from going to Canada. I mean, it's more, it's simply more people. It's a bigger footprint, and I think they can move into Canada without. I think the concern you would have with expansion, you wouldn't want the NWSL to go to 20 teams right now because the talent pool just wouldn't be there. But I think they're being careful with expansion. They're up to, it's gone from 8 to 10 in now their 5th season. And I think they could pretty easily go to 12. And I think the Canadian market would be great. I think a team in Toronto or Vancouver would do well. And also perhaps it would give Canadian players a little bit more respect. I think most of the teams in the NWSL are predominantly American with a couple of Canadians. And but then you look at some other things where, Kaylin Kyle was just made available to all 10 teams in the relatively new and obscure allocation process, and all 10 teams passed, which struck me as a little bit odd. Now, if you have a Canadian team in the league, perhaps that's an obvious, but not saying that, Toronto or Vancouver would want to start Team Canada and enter that in the NWSL, and not that you'd be able to pry Christine Sinclair away from Portland or anything like that. But perhaps you'd have a team that has, maybe half Canadians or something like that. And I think that would be good. I think it's been Canada has a lot of talent that I wonder where it's all going right now, if they're really getting a chance to develop as they should.
That's fair enough. You mentioned you don't want to overexpand, but at the same time, you look at the top of the table right now, and you see North Carolina right there. Tell me what the success of that team's been. Why have they been able to launch so well?
Well, they had a lot of confidence coming out of last year when they were Western New York, and they won the championship with a fairly young team. I think that they overachieved a bit last season. They benefited. They got into the playoffs because of a quirk in the schedule where they're playing last place Boston more often than other teams. And then they made the most of their opportunities in the semifinals and final. So you had a young, talented team coming into its own, coming off of winning a championship, a year or two earlier than anyone would have expected. So certainly very confident. But at the same time, they're still prone to making some youthful mistakes here and there, and they've had some serious losses since their fast start. So, but I think that the move may have helped them a little bit. I think that they're getting enthusiastic home crowds. They really need to shut up the guy with the bullhorn. That's kind of a complaint of people who watch NWSL broadcasts from Cary. But it's been a solid start for them in North Carolina. It's a good fan base and a good young roster that's still developing and has made the transition very well.
On the other side of the table right now, the Houston Dash just fired their head coach, and the assistant will continue as an interim. And what is really surprising to me too, this is a week removed from the famous game against Kansas City, if I'm not mistaken, in Houston, where it was 120 degrees Fahrenheit. We had a player pass out at the end of the game, and a lot of controversies in Houston the last few weeks. What can you tell us about the Dash and their struggle in 2017 so far?
Well, the Dash. It's funny. I've seen them play twice because I live in near Washington, so I can make it to a lot of Spirit games, and they've already played the Spirit twice. They beat the Spirit, and then came back and lost to them after they changed coaches. And they look like a talented team that just can't quite click. And against the Spirit, they created a ton of chances. They have a lot of dangerous runners. They're a good counterattacking team. They can also play direct. They have speedy forwards in Kime Ohai, who is someone who, it generally takes attacking players a year or two to come into their own in this league. I know Rose Lavelle in Boston is kind of resetting the standard on that. She's doing very well in her first season. But Ohai is one of those players who is, starting to get into the national team mix. It just seems like something doesn't quite click, and then you have a bad injury here. And with teams that are struggling, every little problem seems to be exacerbated. And they had injury on their back line, and they had to reshuffle. And then I think it was 2 minutes into the Washington Spirit game, their last game, their first one under their interim coach. They gave up a goal within about 2 minutes. And it was just, it was a beautiful play by the Spirit, but also it was a little bit of disorganization at the back where they had some people in a familiar role. So it's simply momentum at this point. I still think Houston, if they had a few breaks go their way and started clicking a little bit, I think they could make a run. Right, probably not to the playoffs. I think that seems out of reach, but I think they could climb up the table. I think I wouldn't put them in last place with a Sharpie at this point. I'll put it that way.
a big success in the league since their first year. The Orlando Pride has been a very success on the pitch, not so much, but in the stands and on social media, their quote unquote branding is going pretty well. But there's a player from my neck of the wood who just announced her retirement a few weeks ago. Jose Belanger, former Orlando Pride player and Canadian women's national team. What is your opinion of Belanger as a player from we're a little bit biased here. From Montreal. Duane's from Canada. From Canada, yes, but from Toronto. So we do have a special place in our soccer analysis for the women's national team. But how do you see Jose Belanger's career? How do you see her time with the Pride?
Well, I mean, it's always the same when these players leave the sport before they started to fade away. And the NWSL, because it's not a particularly high-paying league. I mean, the U.S. national team players, we at least knew what they were being paid under the old collective bargaining agreement. There's a new collective bargaining agreement. We don't know what they're being paid now, but I think it's safe to assume it's not less. The Canadians, we don't really know how much they're being paid and how much incentive that is to stick in the game. And so it's just a shame to see people disappear. I mean, she's 31. Right. And so someone who you would think would have a few more years left, but at the same time, I mean, the life of a pro soccer player, even if you are getting paid a lot, is demanding. And so I think it's understandable sometimes to see people leave. You always wonder when it comes not in an off season. When it comes partway into a season, you always wonder if there's what's going on, what made it so imperative to retire now. But sometimes it's as simple as life opportunities. So I don't know what she has going on. I don't know what she plans to do next. But as fans, we can be a little sad, but at the same time, I think we have to respect the decision that there's she probably sees something greener to move to.
Beau, let's move to the other bottom of the table. A lot of controversy in Washington in the off season. Have things gone down there?
They have. They really have. I think they really needed to change the narrative, and that's what I wrote when it was first announced that Mallory Pugh was coming out and going to play in the league. And I think they surprised a lot of people, including me. I bought into the notion that she didn't want to play in Washington, and I thought the Spirit would have to make a trade because, and I don't know how many of your listeners know the allocation process, that Washington was first place through a complicated series of trades. So they had first right of refusal on whoever came into the league, and when a Mallory Pugh comes in, you don't just give that up for nothing. And so I thought that they would have to make a trade, but it turns out they were able to make their case to Pugh that, hey, this is a good place for you to develop. And so far, so good. She's been playing well for the Spirit and scored in their win against Houston. Her first goal, which is, she admitted the ball did not go where she was aiming. She nutmegged the keeper. She said she was actually aiming toward one of the posts. But it's good when you're a young player with a lot of expectations to get that first goal. And so, the narrative has certainly changed now. Now it's that said, they're not likely to challenge for a playoff spot either. The talent losses they had were great to begin with, and then they came into the season and immediately lost Joanna Lohman for the season with a knee injury, and Tori Huster's been out for a few games as well, and that's their midfield engine gone. And so they've been plugging in with young draft picks who are working hard and doing their best. But at times it has looked like the Spirit's first season when they were young and they'd have the occasional injury problem, and they'd have flashes of brilliance, but also just moments of inexperience where they'd really, that would come back and hurt them. So it's still not the high of last year when you had, Crystal Dunn and Allie Krieger all in good form and racing through the regular season, playing brilliantly, and then coming within 30 seconds of winning the championship. But they have at least got something positive going out of the season. So I think the panic is gone from Washington. Now it's the reality that they're a mid to bottom table this year, probably bottom of the table, or in the bottom three, but with some players who are worth watching.
When I read most thought on the NWSL right now, they look at Portland, they look at the Thorns, currently in third place, not at the top of the table quite yet, and I think that it's just a matter of time until their quality pulls out. Do you share that view that this is the favorite right now?
I would put them in the top two with Chicago. I think Chicago is an outstanding team. The attack of Kristen Press and Sofia Huerta is just marvelous to watch. I do think Portland will push into that top two because I think North Carolina has started to come back a little bit, and North Carolina will still be there. There's a distinct top three right now with Chicago, Portland, and North Carolina. Of those three, I would probably rank North Carolina third, but I might still rank Chicago ahead of Portland at this point. I think that attack is just beautiful, and they have Julie Johnston playing actually a variety of roles. She's been playing, she's been a center back with the national team, but she's been playing at times more of a defensive mid role with Chicago. I'm sorry, Julie Ertz, as she is now known, Julie Ertz. And so Chicago's a very solid team. Portland is one of those teams when they have all their talent together, when everybody's back from injury or whatever international breaks they have. They're a team that you will not want to face in the playoffs, especially because they'll be on a mission after their disappointment last year. I wouldn't worry about Portland making the playoffs, and I would hate to face them in the playoffs. I wouldn't hand them the league title just yet, though, because North Carolina's dangerous, and Chicago's attack is just marvelous to watch.
I'm a kit nerd, Beau, and I'm a logo nerd as well. And I have to say, the Red Stars logo, it does something for me. I always thought that Chicago is not using their flag of the city properly with their sports team and using that iconography. They're not, and I think the Red Stars are onto something. But they're onto something on the pitch as well. They're second in the league. What can you tell us about the Red Stars? Who are their best players, and what's their ceiling this year?
Oh, the ceiling is the championship. They are absolutely a championship contender, and they have the attack again with Kristen Press and Sofia Huerta, Julie Ertz playing things in the back. They have some other. Daniel Colaprico is a workhorse midfielder who's gotten some consideration for the national team as well. A lot of people really want to see her playing. They have experienced players like Jen Hoy who's playing forward. Stephanie McCaffrey was on in the national team midst. And of course, they have perhaps the best goalkeeper in the league, Alyssa Nair, who right now is probably the number one for the U.S., especially with Ashlyn Harris being hurt right now. And Casey Short as well. So that another defender who's gotten time with the national team. So, it's funny. Chicago doesn't have someone with the marquee value of an Alex Morgan or a Tobin Heath or a player or Hope Solo, who's not in the league right now. But they have a lot of very good national team players, and they're really not weak many places on the field. So, it is a team that I would not want to bet against right now, and I would love to see a Chicago-Portland final. I think that would be a fantastic game. Of course, I think North Carolina may have something to say about that, but a Chicago-Portland final, I think would just be breathtaking.
Both the Fire and the Red Stars sort of emerging from the doldrums. It's kind of a good year for Chicago soccer so far, Beau. Let's turn our attention sort of more general. We've seen in this past season a couple high-profile American players go to Europe to play in Europe. I'm wondering if you think that's going to continue to be a trend, and whether the Europeans start to emerge to understand NWSL as the defined top destination for top players.
The sense I get right now is that the players going overseas, it's more likely to happen early in a quadrennial cycle when there's no World Cup or Olympics around the corner. And that during a World Cup year or an Olympic year, players are more likely to stay home. And we've seen other countries do that as well. Germany took that approach. They stressed keeping their players home when big tournaments were coming up. And I think the U.S. Federation has the wherewithal to make that happen for its national team players. The Federation, I think, can keep players happy and keep them away from Leon and their happy Twitter president who likes to go chat with players online and convince them to come over to Leon. Now, I think what could happen is you might see sort of the next tier of players who, at least, again, we don't know the details of the next last deal, but we do know the maximum salary in the NWSL for a non-U.S. national team player is still not very high. That's the sort of thing that Lyon or PSG could easily bid against. I'm not quite sure about Wolfsburg. I know Wolfsburg as a club, nothing to do with their performance on the women's side, but Wolfsburg as a club has encountered some difficulties in the past year. But also you have the English clubs that are flexing their muscle, and they can land players like Heather O'Reilly, who's on the back end of her career, but still a very good player. I think they could keep players like her, and that's a place where if you're a 28-year-old veteran and you're not in the U.S. national team mix, and Chelsea or Man City is offering you more money to go, I think it makes sense to go. And so those are the players that I think NWSL will be in danger of losing with its current salary structure. And I'm not sure there's anything they can really do about it right now. I mean, I think that they boosted the minimum salary a good bit with their this past year, and that was I sense was more of a priority because you need to keep players in the game. You need to keep players from retiring at age 23, as some have. So you boost the minimum salary, that can happen, and then you at least get them in the NWSL for a good 5 or 6 year career. If they go to Europe when they're 28 to make a little bit extra money, that's it. It's not quite a win-win, but it's not the end of the world either.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with having some competition out there either. Kadisha Buchanan goes to Paris, and that's a good experience for her. All right, Beau, before we say goodbye, anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
To promote, I may have a very interesting women's soccer story in The Guardian in the next 2 weeks or so. I can't really talk about it just yet. So keep reading read The Guardian every day anyway, because it's a fantastic paper or fantastic website. So.
Fair enough. The Guardian, I've always enjoyed it. But all right, we'll say goodbye to you now. Beau Dure on the NWSL. We'll check in later this season. Thanks again.
Thank you.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
Welcome back. Thanks to Beau, as always, for taking some time. We didn't get to your club today. There's only so many minutes. We could have talked to Beau, probably just asking him about team after team after team until 11. But at some point, we have to.
At some point, Duane, we have to talk about. Yesterday, something happened. Duane, something that we thought and we were led into believing and were told that might take a year or a year and a half to happen. Well, it happened yesterday.
Alphonso Davies, which is Canadian. What a hoser.
Alphonso Davies will play for Canada.
I told this guy
I had to. Come on.
He said, "Oh,
Canada. Alphonso Davies is coming.
This one in a while.
Exactly, right? It's about time. Alphonso Davies, Duane, as sworn allegiance for the Maple Leafs, Dwayne. Alfonso Davies already took a kit of the national team in his hand in the picture with Octavio Zambrano. I'm losing my shit here.
This is there's an old adage that you don't believe a transfer rumor, and this isn't a transfer clearly, but you don't believe a transfer rumor until you see an awkward photo of someone holding up the strip or a scarf. Well, we've seen the awkward photo of the kid holding up the strip. So there you go. On the lake shore, so the waterfront too. Beautiful shot of the Vancouver waterfront. Look, he's flying to Montreal. In fact, he's probably in Montreal right now. If you want to go track him down, Kevin.
Am I going to be able to talk to Alfonso Davies next week? Dwayne, Baloo. Hi, Baloo. Come on, Baloo. Take the leap. Take the leap of faith.
There is a natural way to ask him that question right now, actually. So, in the news that Alfonso Davies is committed to Canada, that would be a perfectly reasonable question to ask him in a scrum in the near future. I would just say that to any Montreal reporter out there listening.
Yes, Duane, I get the message. I get the message, Duane. I'll see what I can do.
All right, let's pump the brakes a little bit, just a little bit. I don't want to pump the brakes too much because we don't have much up here. But I'm going to pump the brakes just a minute. Daniel Squazzaro wrote for MLSsoccer.com, and in a typical Daniel way, he was telling us to not put too much pressure on the kid and to be aware that others have come. And he made comparisons to Kevin Alleman, for instance, who I don't think is quite in the same level or ever was or anyone ever thought was, Daniel, if you're listening. But nonetheless, he is right that we all were putting a lot of attention back in 2013 to get Alleman capped, and he's never been capped since. So he has the 2-minute run out at the end of that Gold Cup game to cap time, so he didn't go play for Costa Rica. I don't think there was much danger of him playing in Costa Rica in hindsight, but nonetheless, that's the case. Interesting stuff. When this broke yesterday, and it just broke in this completely casual way on Twitter of all places. Well, I think everything breaks on Twitter nowadays. It's
well, it's kind of a place for that, man.
The president of the free world right now, God help us all, tends to break things on
don't you know,
Twitter,
Dwayne?
so
apparently on Twitter, it's official statements. So it was an official statement by Canada Soccer because it is official when it's on Twitter.
Yeah, let's avoid this conversation any further right now. Now, look, when it came out, everyone lost their mind, obviously. And what I found, I started asking the people that I know within the CSA, and they kind of were giddy because they had managed to keep this under wraps. Apparently, this had been in the works for 3 or 4 months, and then about an hour later, we get the 40-man roster of Canada for the Gold Cup, and sure enough, he's on that, which means that they had been holding off the information in the hopes that they could get this through in time. And I think that's kind of clever. It defies what people have this sack the CSA mentality still to this day that suggests that they don't do anything right, and they don't act in the benefit of the sport. They just act in the benefit of their little fiefdoms within the provinces or whatever. When the reality is there's been a lot of changes there. We've seen the league launch now, and here's just another example of how the new CSA is much, much different than the old CSA. And I'm not going to sit here and give them a free pass. There's still things they do that frustrate me. There's still problems that need to be changed structurally and otherwise. But this is an example of how the top leadership has identified the national team success as a major priority and does things, pragmatic things you can look at and point to, like launching a league that's crazy to launch, really, let's be honest. But good luck, and we all want to succeed, and has worked tirelessly to get Alfonso Davies fast-track citizenship, which is not an easy thing to do.
We thought it was impossible, Duane. We've talked about this for years. We thought it was impossible to do. And lo and behold, boom, Davies is Canadian.
And look, there are other sports bodies out there, like in the lead up to Olympics, that have had individuals that are, near world championship level that they haven't been able to get fast-track to Canadian citizenship to represent Canada in the Olympics. So this is not a snap the fingers, get it done. You have to work tirelessly, like I said, to get it done. And the CSA did this. And then when I was talking to my sourcing in the CSA, I learned that this was actually the 5th time that they managed to do it. And I put the list out on my Twitter yesterday if you want to look it up. But, this is the highest profile of the players. But again, to go back to Squazzaro's article, he said to pump the brakes a little bit. I think that that's fair to a point, but I also think that based on what we're seeing and the age and everything else of Davies, and not just our take on it, like no one in the United States was talking about Kevin Alleman, or outside of the United States was talking about Kevin Alleman in 2013. We were just desperate for anything. This is on the heels of 8-1, and we saw this young kid that looked pretty good, and we knew that he had other options, and we'd lost so much before, and we just lost 8-1. To get him was symbolic at the time. This is a player that is a topic of conversation in MLS circles and is a target of, we know is a target of clubs around the world right now watching this kid develop. This is a legitimate gap.
Duane, let me read the statement by Alphonso Davies at his presser yesterday. Those are the words of Alphonso Davies. It's a great honor to be able to call myself a Canadian citizen. First of all, I am thankful to Canada Soccer and Whitecaps FC for their tremendous support throughout this process. Not many people can say they're Canadian citizen. Knowing that it's one of the best countries in the world, I'm very proud that I'm one of those people. I'm also extremely thankful to my parents for everything they've done throughout the years, carrying the family to this safe environment. This is our home. This is where I grew up, and now to have the opportunity to represent the men's national team is a great honor.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a part of the story too that is going to appeal to a lot of non-Canadian or non-soccer fans in Canada. Is that sort of they're refugees, and you know that's a storyline. That's something that I think will resonate beyond the soccer public. That this family came, they first moved. Apparently, they moved to Niagara Falls first.
Yep, the Windsor. They moved to Windsor, Ontario, for a year when he was age 5.
Windsor, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, when he was age 5, and they settled in Edmonton a year later. He is born in a refugee camp in Ghana to Liberian parents.
There you go, and. I know I've talked to the FC Edmonton people before too, and they like to defer the credit in terms of the development. They say that basically the role that they played up there was to start his process. This is something that directly Jeff, the leader of the head of the head of the FC Edmonton Academy, has told me directly that he doesn't want Edmonton to be taken, to Vancouver to not get the credit for developing the kid. He thinks that FC Edmonton did good work early, but it was basically they were just happenstance. They caught him and found this kid, and he was head and tails above them, and they immediately realized that they needed to move him on to a higher environment, and they worked to do that and got him to the Whitecaps. So, the FC Edmonton narrative around this is something that we maybe push in the back a little bit, just to sort of be contrarian towards the Whitecaps,
But Duane, it's something that we actually want to see happen more. It's that streamlining a talent, right? Even if your example, we'll take FC Edmonton because it's the example here, but it could be your local club. It could be any club in a way that somehow you find a diamond in the rough. You find a player that's head above everybody else. You're like, he's already passed what we can give him. Let's find him a place where he can develop and who knows, become the next Cristiano Ronaldo. I'm not saying that Davies is that. I'm just saying this is how it happens. And maybe sometimes it happens at anywhere. And FC Edmonton recognized that situation and moved into a place where he could get the environment and the professional surrounding that he need at his age right now to bloom into his full potential.
Yeah, there's a lot of people, to move away from Davies for a second, there's a lot of people in the GTA, in the soccer community, who like to gleefully put out that Raheem Edwards spent up until he was about 15 outside of the PFC Academy environment because they want to put that out there. As you say, Raheem Edwards was a talent that needed to go to a higher level to get the type of training that was needed. The problem in this country isn't necessarily that the MLS academies are out there. It's that there aren't enough academies of the same caliber that can offer them that competition, and hopefully the Canadian Premier League coming in will do that for them. But at any rate, to go back to Davies, look, I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever. He's on that 40-man roster, and real quickly on that, I mean, it's kind of a nice mix of Patrice Bernier on there, which I'd like to see, and I do hope that he gets a final run out.
And he's deserving because of his play to Duane, right? The way he's playing in Major League Soccer this year, one of the best players from Montreal since the beginning of the season, he has to be named on that roster no matter what.
Yeah, no, and I agree. And we were advocating for that for a month or so heading into this. I just wasn't sure whether they do it. We heard there's been a sort of history of that over the past 6 or 7 years within the Canadian national team. We saw in the Floro's early years him keeping Di Rosario around maybe a little bit past the time that he could really contribute in a true way when we knew he was nearing retirement. And we saw Julian Guzman play right up to the bitter end as well with Canadian national team to provide what I thought proved to be some pretty valuable leadership to them. So Patrice Bernier hanging around, and Zambrano's asking him to stay, to delay his retirement another year, and something that maybe might even happen. I think that has everything to do with them wanting him to take that role that I think that especially de Guzman played. And we've talked about this before, the evolution of Julian de Guzman from what was considered to be a borderline selfish player to, senior leadership role.
An assistant coach
is
with
something
exactly.
that's quite remarkable to see.
Yeah, right. An assistant coach with an eye towards Canada, as de Guzman has with Ottawa, right? He's been vocal too, and we've heard him talk in the Canadian Championship and how he's implicated. Like he's doing pretty well as an assistant with Ottawa. We can say this.
Yeah, and I think Bernier, we obviously know Bernier is going to coach. So I think that Zambrano trying to keep him around in the program into the first year of World Cup qualifying is something that is quite interesting and valuable. Look, to get back to Davies, though, you're not going to go through this effort and put him on that 40-man list unless, injury aside, he's not going to get officially cap-tied in that. And as you said a minute ago, well, one more to go. But look, the other thing Squiz said in his article is that, or no, it wasn't his article, pardon me, it was on Twitter. It was, can we finally put aside this idea that Canada is a net loser when it comes to dual nationals? Because in the past few years, after a bad stretch, let's put, call spade a spade. We lost Hargreaves and then we lost to Guzman. It did seem like we always lost them. But then you look at Arfield and you look at Junior coming in because he had options as well. Then you look at this now, you have to say overall, and then you think back and think of some players that have had dual national opportunities in the past that maybe weren't quite at the same level but contributed to the Canadian program. And I'm going way back into the 90s when I'm talking about this. There's been quite a few of them out there. So I think it's time that maybe we do put that narrative aside. Squiz might be right in that case. And we, accept the players that choose to play here and maybe not hold on as bitterly to the ones who don't. Hargreaves aside, because Owen Hargreaves is the worst.
True. And speaking of Squizzato, he is a contributor to Vice Sports now as well. And he wrote an article about 2 weeks ago about Canada, the World Cup 2026, and a lot of great things. And I suggest you take a look at Squiz his articles on Vice Sports and on MLSsoccer.com. Always great stuff by our friend who is now in the West Coast. The West Coast.
Dizzying thoughts. To final thought, we are going to preview the Canadian women versus Costa Rica home and home. I guess home and home is the wrong way to put it. Winnipeg and Toronto, the double home friendly is what I was trying to say. We will preview that in detail tomorrow. We're going to have our friend Brent Massey on. Everyone loves Lord Bob, so we're going to have a little Lord Bob tomorrow. He's, of course, traveling here to watch the game on Sunday, obviously. Apparently, I'm going to a Wolfpack game with him indirectly on Saturday. So there you go. Duane and Lord Bob in the same room. Hide the children.
Does the space continuum allow us to do that? Like, isn't it like it's going to warp and create a space like breach of time something? I don't know. It's going to be. Are we going to survive the Lord Bob and Duane in the same room?
Yeah, well, we survived the Women's World Cup. There's a photo of me and him beside each other in the stands at the Women's World Cup. That was before I went on a very infamous Twitter rant about why we were cheering Canada off on a 1-1 draw with Holland. But nonetheless, let's put that water under the bridge. That was a long time ago, and there were a few beers involved in that Twitter rant, too, I'll fully admit. That was a very strange day. I got lost in Montreal that day. And by lost, I mean I missed my ride home, and then I had to take the megabus home, and they had to wait overnight outside the thing. It was, I have many Montreal stories. I never stay out of trouble with them.
Yeah, one of these days we'll do a special like Christmas or something, and we reminisce on stories of you and getting lost in Montreal, me getting almost lost in Mexico City and stuff.
Well, I'll tell you about how I saved the Federation during the referendum back in the 90s as a kid one day. That's a story for off air maybe, but I'll tell you that story one day. At any rate, Kevin, on that note,
Yeah.
I guess maybe, I just wanted to set up that we're going to preview the Canadian women's game tomorrow. Is there anything else you wanted to say before we say goodbye in the day?
No, as always, you can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. You can follow our guest today, Beau Dure, at Dure Sport. He covers a lot of NWSL, U.S. Women's National Team, and tweets about soccer basically all the time. Stay tuned tomorrow, 10 a.m. for a preview of the Canadian Women's National Team home and home, like Duane mentioned, series friendlies to celebrate the bronze medal and the retirement of a few players. And you can attend, and tickets are still available for Vancouver and Toronto next Tuesday. Speaking of Tuesday, is it Tuesday? What? It's June 13th. I'm all mixed up in my dates because all I think about is a Grand Prix. But June 13th, Canada, Curacao, and who knows, maybe a Alphonso Davies sighting. You will for sure see Samuel Piet and company. And if you are in the region of Laval, they are practicing right now at the Quebec Soccer Federation home in Boulogne in Laval. So maybe I'm going to be heading this way. It's a beautiful day. Maybe time to watch some Maple Leaf players play on a beautiful day. Until tomorrow, as always, I'm Kevin Laramee, and have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.